Hello, good listeners, occasional trolls, and all other sentient beings who are lined up to get on through the portal and find a good seat in the mended drum. As you're coming through and finding that comfortable chair, but not the comfy chair, I will just let you know that we are still continuing to make progress in the Great Leap Forward, if we dare call it that, for Season 11. We now have some fairly bare-bones videos on YouTube, but they have a couple little extras, a couple little bonuses of our staff in action, and you can find the URL for our YouTube page in this week's show notes. My poor little poetry contest is turning out to be a completely damp squib. I have the 2 limericks from Joe, and other than that, there is vast silence out there in podcast land. Somebody said to me, "Hey, I'm not a poet," and my response is, you don't have to be a poet. You can do whatever you want and call it a poem, and if it's not 50 pages long and is family friendly, I will even read it on the show. So let's get those poetry caps on, boys and girls. As I believe I mentioned, I've been taking another closer look at the Witches series, both the Nanny and Granny books and the Tiffany Aching books, and I'm really developing a lot deeper appreciation for those series, and it's a lot of fun to have that experience after having read all of the Discworld books several times, to still be able to come on something that makes me say, aha. And honestly, those ahas have been coming thick and fast with the Witches books, or if you please, with the books about witches, which is why. And as Fred would say to Nobby at this point, you've just been waiting to say that your whole life, haven't you? Nobby says, of course, no, I just thought it up right here on the spot, Sarge. As I was lying in bed reading last night, the thought struck me that when I came to a word that I didn't know, and actually had to look up, the thought struck me that that's why I love Sir Terry's writing so much, is he uses words that I don't know. And that sounds conceited, but as we say in the United States, at least, no brag, just fact. Back when they used to do it this way, I scored a perfect score on the verbal section of the Scholastic Aptitude Test. Twice. Yes, that's right, twice. But enough, and probably more than enough, about me. You want to know what's been happening in the mended drum. Well, as I mentioned, I've been spending a lot of time in Lanker and on the chalk of late, but when I got back into Ankh-Morpork to get ready to do this week's show, I had occasion to be walking down Filigree Street, went past the Guild of Assassins, and that reminded me of that beautiful new book. I guess you could call it a coffee table book if people still have coffee tables. The Archives of Ankh-Morpork, called the Discworld Anthology Volume 1, which means we can expect further volumes. And I think there comes a point at which more and more it's only hardcore fans that are going to buy some of this product that Narrativium continues to churn out, really. But so far, at least, it continues to be high-quality stuff, and the Ankh-Morpork Archives is broken into 4 sections: Unseen University, the Assassins Guild, the Post Office, and the Thieves Guild. So you get a fairly detailed look at each of those 4 institutions for the pillars of Ankh-Morpork's economy, if not their society. It so happened when I got here that the librarian was here already, enjoying a couple of beers and a prodigious amount of peanuts, and seeing him reminded me of Lords and Ladies, since he and Ponder Stibbins and the Bursar accompany Mustrum Ridcully to Lancre for the wedding of Magrat and King Verence. And in the event, I think it's fair to say that Holy Hell eventuates. I know, I'm on a roll this morning. And amongst the other remarkable things that you see in the pages of Lords and Ladies is the Bursar being used as a bridge. They find a good use for him even when he is in his catatonic, rigid state. And Ridcully encounters Esme, whom he left over 60 years ago to continue his studies at Unseen University. And this prompts a lot of speculations on their part, a lot of what-ifs. And Ponder Stibbons on the way to Lancre has tried to explain it. And what it is the strange phenomena of the crop circles turning up. Granny and Nanny have a different explanation and a much more accurate explanation. But, and this is independent of her encountering Mustrum again after so many years, Granny finds herself experiencing déjà vu without the original vu, which is something that happens to Yossarian in Catch-22, by the way. Sir Terry also ventures into Shakespearean territory again in Lords and Ladies because the play that the Rude Mechanicals, Jason Ogg and the rest, are supposed to be putting on, the entertainment for the marriage, is basically a takeoff on Midsummer Night's Dream. And we do get kind of an Oberon and Titania vibe out of the king and queen of the fair folk. I always get a kick about the way that Sir Terry turned the conventions about the fair folk, the lords and ladies, those beautiful creatures, at least the Tolkien-esque convention, right on its head. Tolkien's elves, of course, are good and noble, with a few exceptions. And Sir Terry's elves are evil little buggers, almost without exception. On the round world, in medieval and earlier myths and legends, elves were not fair and noble and good. By and large, they were quite a bit evil little buggers. So it was actually Tolkien who turned the convention on its head to begin with, and I guess Sir Terry just turned it back right side up. And I think it's safe to say he must have had a lot of fun playing around with and creating the Discworld version of all the monsters, the non-human races, if you will. And certainly the major races, I think we could say evolved. His conception of them and portrayal of them evolved over time. You look at the trolls in the very beginning in Color of Magic / Light Fantastic, and then you see them, say, in moving pictures, and then we begin to see them, detritus specifically, as a watchman, or pork. And there's a definite progression there. There's a definite development. Same thing with the dwarfs. They are first encountered, I think, when Nanny and Granny and Magrat are headed to Genoa, and they have to make part of their journey underground, and they have to have the dwarfs help them. And the dwarfs in that first encounter are quite different from the dwarfs that we come to know, both in general as a species in Ankh-Morpork and specifically in the likes of Sherry Littlebottom as a member of the City Watch. And I suppose that's all pretty self-evident, but it's more importantly the mark of a dedicated writer, a person who was committed to the craft of writing and did it so very well, taking pains to develop the major species of the disc. And by major, I mean the ones that he is choosing to focus on. And having made that decision, then he is very painstaking in his development of those species. And that's something that a good writer writing over the course of several books is going to do for their main characters. Be very careful to develop them well. But Sir Terry does it with entire species and not just individuals. The drum is really starting to fill up now, as you can see. Friday night patrons beginning to filter in, and you may have wondered how it is possible that we and they can all be in the drum at the same time without getting in each other's way or, in fact, affecting each other in any way, and that we can see them and they can't see us. All of this, Ponder Stevens has assured me repeatedly, is due to quantum. And as the monk Lao Tzu once famously stated, there's always bloody quantum. And if anybody should know, he should. Speaking of Lao Tzu, you can put him in the frequent flyer but never in first class category of Discworld character. And what I mean by that is one of those characters who makes appearances in more than one book and who is a main character in those books, but in the grander scheme of things is not somebody that you're going to say, oh yeah, that's a major character, that's a main character in the Discworld books. And you would have to differentiate between main characters and major characters if you were going to go very far down that road, which I do not intend to do today. But now I'm going to be staring out the window for a while, and you won't know that because the recording's going to be paused. But now I have to think about, okay, what are some other characters that fall into that category? In other words, is it really a category? And who should come to mind as a result of that but Leonard of Quirm? I'm sitting looking out the window, and these ideas are bouncing around and sleeting off of me the way that they do to Leonard Quirm all the time. And there it is, there he is. Yeah, he's another one of those characters in the Lao Tzu category. But I am going to suspend the search for others in that category. If you think of any that belong there, shoot me an email. Our new email address, medievalgnome@gmail. All one word, all lowercase, medievalgnome, and that's a Gmail address. And you can also find that address in the show notes. And that change of email addresses is just another element in our plan for world domination. No, I'm sorry, our plan for growing the listenership of Medieval Gnome Productions podcasts, whatever they may be called. And I want to give you another example, an example of an episodic character who nevertheless has to be in the subcategory of a main character, one of the major Discworld characters, and that is Death's granddaughter, Susan Stohilit. I think if you make a list off the top of your head of the 10 main Discworld characters, however you want to define main, I think Susan Stohilit might well jump in there in that top 10, if you will. And there are people for whom Lao Tzu or Leonard of Quirm would make their top 10, but I think those would be outliers. I think they would be much less likely on average to be thought of as, oh yes, that's a major character. That's one of the main characters. I did a segment, may even have been a whole show a while back, on couples in the Discworld novels. But even those who are not couples in the conventionally accepted sense are pairs, and I'm talking about Vimes and Vetinari, Nanny and Granny, Fred and Nobby, Ongo and Carrot, Some of those Ongo and Carrot fall into the first conventional category of couples, but they are also pairs. They come in pairs. It's odd to encounter one without the other. And as pairs, they give us so many memorable moments that wouldn't have happened if it were just the one character and not the two associated in a kind of symbiotic literary relationship, if I can get that high flown without it sounding like a load of codswallop. Ridcully and Stibbins, another pair that comes to mind. And what is evolving, perhaps, is the notion of doing a season or part of a season about the pairs, the Discworld, and then I could do another season about the apples and another season about the plums. No, pairs, groups of two. I know I didn't fool anybody. I would really like to know what your favorite pair of Discworld characters is. I'd like to know so much that I hope that you will send me an email, and if you have never emailed me before, I will send you the famous Clacks episode as a first-time emailer. And if you have emailed me before, I'd still love to know what your favorite pair of Discworld characters is, and I will probably find some way to make it worth your time, as they say. And I freely concede at the outset that favorite pair is all but impossible to do if you think about it at all. If you just kind of think of the phrase and let the first pair pop into your head that does, it's a good chance that they are your favorite pair, even though you have other favorite pairs. And for me, that's just like if you ask me what my favorite Discworld book is. My answer is going to be almost all of them. Because, yes, there are a couple that I don't rush to reread, but 2 or 3 out of 41, that's a pretty darn good batting average. We had a bit of a discussion on the Discord server the other day about A Slip of the Keyboard, that collection of Sir Terry's essays. And that reminded me that I have only read the Long Earth series out of Sir Terry's non-Discworld writings. Oh, and Good Omens. Good Omens. My goodness, Good Omens. But that reminder gave me a really pleasant feeling because it made me realize that I have all of those books, a couple dozen of them, to look forward to reading for the first time. But I'm not going to start reading those today in the drum. I have other fish to fry, or, as I believe a troll puts it, other maddened grizzly bears to stun. Can't put my finger on a book for that one. If you can think of it, again, let me know. And I'm going to loop all the way back around to the Discs monsters again. And you got to consider that the Discs monsters are really not one bit more monstrous than the humans, but a species that Sir Terry kind of adopted, made his own, put his very unique stamp on, is the golems. The golems of the Disc, and specifically the golems of Antwerp, just work. That's all they do. That's what their purpose is. That's what they were created for, and so they do it until they're told to stop. But golems begin to, and maybe they did all along, but they begin to have feelings. They begin to ever so slightly question the purpose of the task they've been given to do. They begin to think critically. At the same time, they experience the first glimmerings of existential angst. And certainly when we see this happening in the book Feet of Clay, we see the golems, especially Dorfel, becoming more human in a good way in his case. But he definitely wakes up. He definitely becomes fully sentient. He definitely ceases to be a tool and becomes a creature. And that leads eventually to the Golem Trust, to more and more golems being liberated, owning themselves, thinking critically. But still, as far as we know, it can fairly be said that they live to work. They are as industrious as dwarfs without the dwarfen characteristic of acquisitiveness. They do their jobs and keep themselves to themselves. And yet there is still that lingering prejudice against golems in Ankh-Morpork. They're taking other people's jobs. They're creepy looking with those red holes in the head that serve as their eyes. And on the litany goes. But I guess it just goes to show you as well that in any society there will always be a certain proportion of bigoted, prejudiced, racist idiots. And as Ankh-Morpork grows and more species come in and they become more accepted, then the haters lose the object of their hatred. And if they continue to express hatred towards, for example, the dwarfs, then they are really out of step with Ankh-Morpork as it is today. And so I think they begin to feel like a bit of a twit, and they have to find a new target. And the golems, they don't protest and they don't take offense, so makes it pretty difficult to sustain a really intense dislike of them, because you can't get a rise out of them, if you will. Then there are the trolls, that other species whose incredible physical power is their main trait, or one of their main traits. And trolls, of course, get the knock in Ankh-Morpork that they're stupid. Trolls are stupid. Well, trolls' brains are designed to function in a cold environment, and as we see when detritus gets trapped in the Pork Futures warehouse, as a troll's brain cools down, the troll becomes more and more intelligent and finally achieves the status of complete geniushood. Unfortunately, that cold brain means that the next thing that's going to happen to the troll, if they don't get warmed up a little bit, is they're going to die. But you think about detritus and you think about all the mathematics he did in the frost on the wall of the Pork Futures warehouse, and finally reached the ultimate conclusion, equals. And Cuddy, when he rescues detritus, says equals what? And of course detritus is already getting warmed up, and his IQ is sinking back to the normal Ankh-Morpork range of temperatures into the low double digits. But although he may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, detritus really has a lot of common sense, and it sees him through a lot of situations which otherwise might be really problematic. He lacks common sense when it comes to the Peacemaker, his crossbow. He seems to forget, I think, what a powerful weapon it is, and sometimes he forgets to put the safety catch on, even though Mr. Vimes has taught him when Mr. Safety Catch is not on, Mr. Crossbow is not your friend. And then going all the way back around to the idea of Discworld pairs, that begs the question, who do you pair detritus with? And that begs the answer, I really don't have a clue. But I do have a clue that it is time to begin wrapping this ramble up. Before I go, I want to remind you to check out our YouTube channel, and subscribe would be wonderful if you're so inclined. You can find the URL as well as the URL for the Patreon page and the Discord server. You can find all of those in the show notes, as well as the new email address. And all of that information going forward will be included in every show's show notes, so that if you need to find it, you can always just go to the show notes and there it is. I'm going to leave you today with some bloopers to enjoy, and I will just remind you, till we meet again, to mind how you go. Sir Harry, who the hell is Sue Harry? Harry Sue, Lord Randy, counterclockwise. And I don't even know if I get it stopped. I didn't. And I do. The most common round wood. I knew I was going to screw that up. Round world woods. And the final part of this comprehensive reminder, I can't say reminder. There was parsley, and that push comes to shove. And it reminded me that I have so much of his non-Discworld stuff yet to read. I've read the Long Earth series. Have you read it? Wow. Okay, I read it.